voice up.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Brown?
We were talking about Corinna Blake.
Yes.
September 25th, 2018. You've been a nurse for how long at this point?
2.5 years.
Have you ever worked anywhere outside of the ICU at Mount Carmel?
No.
And besides that first 6 months, have you ever worked any other shifts besides the night shift at Mount Carmel?
No.
And besides Dr. Hagris and Dr. Husel, have you ever worked with any other doctors outside the day shift ever in your career?
At the end, there was a nurse practitioner that worked on the night shift with Dr. Husel. I don't know if she was in her preceptorship, but that's the only other person I can think of.
Okay.
You guys hearing her okay? No?
All right.
Let's throw it out there.
I'm going to step back just a little bit and raise my voice a little bit, okay? So, tell us about what you remember of Corinna Blake. Look back in your mind's eye. September of 2018, you're walking onto the floor of the ICU. What's her condition? What do you do?
She had been declining. She was not doing well. She was maxed out on pressors, blood pressure medicine to keep your blood pressure up. Just not doing well. A resident had come in and did a palliative talk and changed her code status to a DNR-CC.
Who did that?
Dr. Sagar Gandhi, a resident
All right.
from day shift.
Okay. Doctor, repeat the name and can you spell it for her?
Yeah, Dr. Sagar Gandhi, Sagargandhi.
Okay.
All right.
Did you get that, Sam?
Yes.
You guys get it? Okay.
So she's declining. Dr. Sagar Gandhi has talked to family about DNR-CC.
Yes.
What, if anything, do you remember about what brought her to the hospital and her condition when she arrived at the hospital?
I believe it was a week prior. She had come in. She had an ulceration on her belly, a hernia that was infected pretty bad. Also had like maggots and bugs and stuff in that, as well as lice in her hair. She was brought up to the ICU from the ER when she came in, and they intubated her, and she was on a lot of medicines.
Had you been caring for her previous to the date of extubation?
No.
All right. So this is all you found out that day when she was extubated?
Mm-hmm.
All right. What, if anything, did you know about, or you thought you knew about, her prior drug use?
She had addiction. She had alcohol addiction.
All right. At the time in 2018, did you think she had some other type of addiction?
I thought it might have been drug addiction.
All right. So, a decision is made for DNR-CC. How many patients do you have that night besides Miss Blake?
I was supposed to have Miss Blake and then another patient, but because of Miss Blake's condition, I asked to be singled with that patient.
Why did you ask that?
Because when I came on shift, she was still a full code. So at some point in the night, I expected her to code, and I didn't want to have to worry about taking care of the other patient while I was taking care of her.
Okay. So when the decision is made to extubate, what happens next? Is Dr. Sagar Gandhi still there, or is there another doctor now in charge of her care?
He left. He was on day shift, so he left. Dr. Husel was on for that night. So once the doctor has the talk with the family to change code status, then typically medications are put in, orders are put in for medications to keep the patient comfortable when the tube is taken out.
Okay. How much experience at this point in 2018 had you had with palliative extubations?
Some experience.
What about training? What did they teach you about palliative extubations in that 13-month course you took to become a nurse?
Very little.
What about training at Mount Carmel?
There was a palliative care class that we went through in orientation, but it really did not apply to what we needed to know in the ICU. It was more geared towards 3 Tower, who had palliative and hospice patients.
Okay. So where did you learn about how to do palliative extubations?
In the moment with preceptors and with the other nurses around me.
Did the doctors also teach you about palliative extubations?
I don't think I ever was taught by the doctors for palliative extubation.
So you're learning from those around you at the nighttime in the ICU?
Yes.
All right. So is there family there at bedside when it's time to palliatively extubate her?
Yes.
Do you recall if the family stayed inside or not, the room?
When the tube was taken out, family stepped outside the curtain.
Okay.
And I called them back in as soon as the tube was out.
You said that medication orders are put in, and then you go get the medication.
Correct.
Did that happen in this case?
In this case, the orders were put in. I believe I looked at them and I had questions. So I called Dr. Husel on the phone.
All right. Were the medication orders given to you or were they in the computer?
I believe they were in the computer.
All right. So you called Dr. Husel. Do you recall what those medication orders were?
500 micrograms of fentanyl and 6 milligrams of Versed.
All right. Why did you call Dr. Husel?
It seemed like a high dose.
All right.
But
What, if anything, did Dr. Husel say when you questioned this high, what seemed to be to you a high dose?
he said it was okay and to give it.
Did you question him further?
I did not.
Did you ask for any other explanations?
I did not.
Why not?
I trusted his judgment. I had also called the pharmacy and my charge nurse. My charge nurse was busy with something else at the time, but I also called pharmacy and asked them about it. And I didn't have anything solid to back up my concerns with the medication dose.
All right. Regarding pharmacy, do you recall whether or not you told them what the procedure was for?
I'm not sure.
Okay. What do you mean you didn't have anything to back up your concerns? Tell the folks what that means.
I thought the dose was high, but because of what the pharmacy told me, I didn't have anything that told me, yes, this is not right, this shouldn't be done.
What can happen? Okay, so what happens if you say, do you have the right not to follow a doctor's order regarding medication?
Yes.
All right. What would you do if you decided not to give that medication? What would be the procedure? Who would you go to next, et cetera?
I would tell the doctor, then I'd go to my charge nurse if I had an issue with the medication, and then up the chain of command.
Is the charge nurse technically in your chain of command?
I don't think so, but that was always where I would start.
And why would you start with the charge nurse?
Because the charge nurse has the most experience on the unit.
All right. Who is the next person in your chain of command?
The nursing supervisor.
And is there a nursing supervisor working at night in the ICU?
They're working over the hospital, so they're somewhere in the hospital.
All right. And so that's your chain of command, correct?
Yes.
What happens if you're wrong?
You get written up for insubordination.
And who would write you up for insubordination?
I believe the doctor would.
Did you give this medicine?
Yes.
And you said it was because you trusted Dr. Husel.
Yes.
Let's talk about why you trusted Dr. Husel. Describe what you observed with Dr. Husel during your 2.5 years in the nighttime ICU.
He was always around when you needed him. If I were to call him and say, hey, I have concerns about this patient, I need you here right now, he would come right around the corner and come look at them. I would talk about my concerns with him. He also did a lot of teaching on the unit for the nurses, whether that be like vent talks or talking about pathophysiology, why are these things happening to your patient. So he would sit and educate us.
Okay. Did you know about his training?
He went to Cleveland Clinic.
Is that considered a good school?
Yes.
Is that another reason you trusted him?
Yes.
Went to a good school and was very engaging in a teaching doctor.
Yes.
All right. So when he said it was okay in your mind.
I trusted his judgment.
So what'd you do next? How'd you get the medication out?
I pulled it from the Pyxis. I used the override function. I don't know why.
Well, why do you say you don't know why you use the override? We've heard that override is used all the time. In your mind, when is it?
Finish the question, please.
In your mind, when is it appropriate to use the override function on the Pyxis machine?
If there's an emergency
Overruled.
situation or.
Okay, hold on. Overruled, I permit the question.
Judge, counsel changed it the second time, but the first time he said, we've heard that overrides were done all the time in his question.
So you withdrew the first question, implement the second one?
It was a transition, Judge, into explanation of.
I'll permit the question, no objection. Can you answer it?
Yeah, so you can override medication from the Pyxis if there's an emergency situation. So if someone is a danger to themselves or others, or they're going to try to pull their breathing tube out, which is very painful. There's a balloon on the end of the tube, and when you pull that out, they can cause damage. So those would be reasons to use the override. We also use the override for things like sterile water. If you dropped a medication or if you spilled it, you would use override for that as well.
In your mind, is this palliative extubation of Corinna Blake an emergency situation?
No, it was not.
So what, if anything, can you offer as to why you pulled these medications out on override?
I don't know. I don't know what I was thinking at that point.
All right. So you pull them out. Do they come out in 500 microgram unit doses?
I believe they come out in 100 microgram doses.
So how many bottles did you have to pull out for Corinna Blake?
5 for fentanyl, 3 for Versed.
All right. So, because it was 6, what were the unit doses for Versed?
The Versed comes in 2 milligram vials, so 2, 4, 6, 3.
All right. And what were the instructions per Dr. Husel on how this was to be given to Corinna Blake?
I don't understand the question.
What are the 5 rights? Well, let me read. I'll back up here. What are the 5 rights of medication?
Right patient, right medication, right dose, right route, and right time.
What route did Dr. Husel instruct you to give to Corinna Blake?
It was intravenous, so IV, into her IV access.
Was this an IV push or an IV bag?
A push.
All right. The route was an IV push. How is that delivered? And how quickly or how slowly is that delivered?
It's supposed to be administered over 2 minutes.
All right. So after pulling out the tube, the family steps out. Do you thereafter give her that dose into her?
The medication's given first. The IV drips that are running are all turned off. The tube comes out, and then the family comes in.
All right. What happened next?
About an hour later, I believe, the patient passed away.
All right. You say that you didn't recall receiving much, if any, training in nursing school about palliative extubations. You do recall a course that was given to you, or a talk that was given to you at Mount Carmel. Did you ever talk to Dr. Husel about his practices in palliative extubations?
In what regards?
In regards to how he would talk to a family?
So he had a palliative talk that changed at some point in 2018. The talk before was when he would sit down with the family, the patients.
Objection, non-responsive.
I disagree, overruled.
The patient isn't doing well. These are your choices on what we can do. We can continue care or we can take the tube out. The talk changed at some point.
I'm going to stop you there. How did you know that the talk had changed at some point?
I had heard about it on the unit.
Okay. So, did you ask him how the talk had changed?
Yes.
What did Dr. Husel say regarding how had the talk changed?
He said the talk is more, they had a good run, the patient did a good job, but they're just not getting better. So we can either continue what we're doing or we can take the tube out and let them die with dignity, something along those lines.
How is this different, in your understanding, than how he had talked to families before?
It's more of a pointed conversation. It's a little bit more aggressive than the old talk.
What, if anything, did you ask him regarding?
Objection to the opinion.
I'll permit it.
What, if anything, did you ask him regarding how the success rate was with the change in the talk?
I had asked him how many people were choosing to go palliative over continuing care, and he said, I'm somewhere for 24 for 24 or 24 for 27, something along those lines.
It was one of those two, or did he give you both of those options?
It was somewhere around there. I don't remember if it was 24 for 24 or 24 for 27, but a very high rate.
Let's talk about Dr. Husel and your observation regarding numbers for him. Did you notice anything about numbers for him?
He seemed to like even numbers.
How did you make that observation?
Okay, hold on. I couldn't quite understand what she said.
I said he liked even numbers.
You liked even numbers.
I would
Okay.
to strike that, Judge.
Overruled.
All
Let's
right.
do something with this.
Yeah. So, did you notice something about the way he would dose medicine, knowing your observation of his even numbers?
So it'd be like 2, 4, 6 milligrams. It wasn't typically like 1 milligram or 3 milligrams or 5 milligrams. It would be typically even numbers.
Did you ever see him do anything with numbers on the microwave?
Yeah, I remember sitting in the break room.
Objection, relevance.
How's this relevant?
Do you want me to do a speaking explanation?
No, but we probably should go sidebar since we've gotten into it. Ladies and gentlemen, see you in a minute. Relax.
You're never gonna hear something like this again.
Ladies and gentlemen, oh, I'm sorry. Just put my glasses on to make sure you're okay. Okay. You're to disregard the last question and answer. Next question, please.
All right, so did you like Dr. Husel?
I did.
Did you trust Dr. Husel?
Yes.
All right. You say he was a person that would always be willing to teach, sit down, actually sit people down and teach them?
Yes.
Did you ever see Dr. Husel do anything to pit people against each other?
Objection. Relevance.
Okay, I understand. I knew that wouldn't there. I'm gonna permit it, but let's tie it up real quick.
What would you see?
So I remember being told by Anne, who was the charge nurse at the time, that
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained.
When you were the charge nurse, what did you know?
pardon?
Objection, she was never a charge nurse.
Okay, I don't think that's what his intent was to ask him the question. Let's rephrase the question, please.
Were you ever a charge nurse?
No.
All right. Did you ever do things to do scheduling?
Yes.
All right. Did you ever become aware through your scheduling as a duty in the ICU and become aware of something Dr. Husel had done to pit people against each other?
Objection.
Overruled.
Calls for speculation.
It's her observations overruled.
What were your observations regarding that?
He put the boys against each other. I don't have exact examples.
The boys against each other?
Some of the nurses.
Objection, move to strike. She said she doesn't have examples.
Overruled.
Tell us about the culture in the ICU at night, the boys. What do you mean by that?
There are certain nurses that Dr. Husel would hang out with and sit with and, chat with.
Do you remember the names of the nurses that he would sit and chat with?
Tyler Redman, Derek Dreyer, Jake Deemer.
And how would you describe the relationship you observed between those you call them boys, those men and Dr. Husel?
Like a bromance.
That was, in your mind, what that was going on there, a bromance? Is that a yes?
Yes.
Judge, we're going to object again. Relevance.
Okay. Overruled. We can go on the record on the break and I'll explain the ruling.
Sure.
Did you ever hear Dr. Husel talk about his relationship with pharmacists?
I remember hearing him say once, the pharmacist will call me and tell me that,
Hold on, there's an objection.
Okay.
Non-responsive to the question.
Overruled.
Go ahead.
I heard Dr. Husel say once, pharmacists tell me I can't give this drug or I can't give that
Objection,
much. And I,
hearsay.
Admission by a party opponent, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Go ahead.
sorry. The pharmacist would tell him not to use a certain drug or don't use this much, and then he would tell them okay, but then would just say like, I'll do what I want to do, give what I want to give.
Okay. They're requesting you get a little louder again. Sometimes we get concentrating and we lower our voice, so, okay? Did you hear the last answer? Okay.
Did they hear?
Sound, yes.
Okay.
He indicated he did.
All right,
I didn't see anybody else shake their head no.
all right.
I got half and half in the top. Okay.
Did you ever see Dr. Husel administer ketamine?
Yes.
What was your experience with ketamine prior to seeing Dr. Husel work?
Objection.
Okay. This one, sidebar. Objections overruled. Would you reiterate your question again?
Okay.
Once she gets typing.
Judge, I apologize. It was brought to my attention that the replies of the last couple of questions, and I don't know what those were not necessarily further understood by others, and they asked.
Any objection to the court reporter reading back the last, let's say, 3 questions and answers?
No objections, Judge.
Zion?
I have no objection, Your Honor.
Okay. What this means is she has to bring her computer up, so this may take a second. Yeah, the last 2 questions and answers, and then the last question beyond that.
Question, did you ever see Dr. Giesel administer ketamine? Answer, yes. Question, what was your experience with ketamine prior to seeing Dr. Giesel?
Okay, so you want a question beyond that?
Before, like 2 before that, we heard that.
You want the name of the nurses, right?
Yeah. It's okay, I'll be fine.
No, I didn't get propounded a question from you guys, I have to address it.
Okay.
Judge, we have no objection to Mr. Zion asking the witness again what the name of the charge nurse was, which I think is the issue.
Is that the thing you're missing?
Oh.
No? Okay. Okay,
Okay.
we'll get there. She has to translate her own script.
I think I can, I think I can just ask, if it's okay, I just ask that question again and see what, and she speaks
Well, there
for
were a
all.
couple questions he's referring to that he didn't hear.
Okay.
Question. Did you ever hear Dr. Giesel talk about his relationship with pharmacists? Answer, I remember hearing him say once the pharmacist would call and tell me, interruption, objection. The objection was overruled. Question, go ahead. Answer, I heard Dr. Giesel say once, pharmacists tell me I can't give this drug or I can't give that drug. Objection, hearsay. The objection was overruled.
Your Honor, if I may, I think it was the question about the culture and the relationships within the ICU. I just don't want, I know it's not my witness and I could be admonished, but
Okay. Can you re-ask that question?
Yes.
Well, hold on, let her get caught up to us. She had to go back in time. Okay, Mr. Zion.
I was, just for transition, taking you back to where we were talking about the culture in the ICU at night. Did you ever see him hang out, you said you referred to them as the boys. Did you ever see him hang out with any male nurses?
Yes.
And what were the names of those male nurses that come to mind regarding the people you would see him often hang out with?
Tyler Redman, Derek Dreyer, Jake Deemer,
Did you ever see him hang out with a PCA also?
Andrew Henry. Yes.
I'm sorry.
Okay, now that's where your voice goes down. You get concentrating on his question and it just goes down. Knock him down with it, okay? Why don't you repeat those four names again, slowly?
Tyler Redman, Jake Deemer, Derek Dreyer, Andrew Henry.
Did you say Joe Henry?
Andrew.
Are we all caught up? Okay. Mr. Zion, back where we were.
Thank you. Ketamine. What experience did you have with ketamine prior to seeing Dr. Husel use it?
None.
Do you know what type of drug ketamine is?
Not anymore.
Okay. Are you still a clinical nurse?
I'm administrative. I don't pass medications.
Okay. Looking back on ketamine, do you remember the appropriate doses for ketamine?
No.
Do you recall if you thought, looking back on ketamine, Dr. Husel used large doses of ketamine?
There was this one patient I remember. She was a psych patient. Had
Slow down and speak up, because I know what you're saying and I'm having trouble. There's this one patient, she was a what
she
patient?
was a psychiatric patient. She had tried to commit suicide.
Okay.
So when someone tries to commit suicide, when they come into the unit, they can't have any jewelry, they can't have a call light, they can't have any silverware, anything that they could use to hurt themselves. So I had to get this patient to get her jewelry out, and she refused to take it out. We ended up calling security. They set these 4 really big men up to try to talk her out of it, and she still wouldn't take the jewelry out. So Dr. Husel ordered 400 milligrams of ketamine. He did not want me to give it until he was in the room, and he wanted 2 syringes.
Objection, non-responsive, narrative.
It is a narrative, but I'm gonna let her finish. Go ahead.
He wanted 2 syringes pulled up, 100 milligrams in each syringe for 200 milligrams total.
Okay. What happened next?
I went to give the patient the medication, and she asked me what it was.
Okay.
And I know that I can't lie to her. Dr. Husel was in the room since I was about to give it.
I'm going to stop you there. What do you mean you can't lie to her?
If I told her what it was, she might have refused to let me give it to her.
Why can't you just lie to her?
Can't lie. I'm not allowed.
By whom? I mean, like, you know, it's like
As a
Mom says you
nurse.
can't lie. Does somebody else say you can't lie?
As a nurse, you cannot lie to your patient.
Is that one of your obligations, ethical obligations as a nurse?
Yes.
All right. And why didn't you want to just tell her what it was for and what it would do?
I was afraid she'd refuse it, not let me give it to her.
So what, if anything, did you see Dr. Husel do?
So Dr. Husel told her this medication was for something. I don't remember what he said, but it wasn't the exact use for the medication.
Did you consider that a lie to the patient?
Yes.
What, if anything, did you do when you saw Dr. Husel lie to the patient about the medication?
I didn't do anything. I gave the medication to her.
Did it work?
Yes.
And were you able to get the jewelry out?
Yes.
All right. Did she have a good outcome then?
Yes.
Why didn't you, you know you're not allowed to lie, were you aware of any ethical obligations of doctors to tell the truth? I'm asking if she was aware of any ethical obligations doctors had to tell the truth.
She's not a doctor, she's not
Okay,
qualified.
I would agree. Are you aware of any?
I
Okay.
wasn't sure.
You're not sure? Okay, move on.
Okay. So Corinna Blake was in September of 2018. In December of 2018, what, if anything, happened regarding people coming to talk to you about things that had happened in the nighttime ICU at Mount Carmel?
The senior leaders had walked the floor and told us that Dr. Husel was no longer working at Mount Carmel.
Okay. What happened next?
A couple of days later, me and the other nurses were put on administrative leave.
All right. At this point, in December, did you still like Dr. Husel?
I did.
Did you still trust Dr. Husel?
Yes.
Did you still at that time think he was a good doctor?
Yes.
What happened next?
He was fired. We were all put on leave.
Did you talk to the police?
Yes.
Did you talk to the police twice?
Yes.
Did you talk to the police and the prosecutors a third time?
Yes.
All right. Did you tell them all the things that you've told us today?
I didn't have the memory then that I do now about what happened. I didn't have the charts to look at. I was given a dosage and a date and say, did you give this? And I said, I don't know.
Once you were given the dose, once you were given the chart, was that able to refresh your memory regarding the care of Corinna Blake?
Yes.
All right. And did you thereafter tell the police and the prosecutors the truth about your care for Corinna Blake?
I didn't see the charts until later, but as I thought about it more, I was able to come up and remember things to
All right.
help me figure out who she was.
All right. So at first you didn't know, but then as you thought about it, you were able to remember the details of it?
Yes.
And since then, have you had a chance to review this chart?
Yes.
Okay. One moment, Your Honor. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Mr. Byers?
Please, the court. Mr. Zion. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Hello.
Now, I want to take you back to the beginning of when all of this started. And there was, I guess administrators had advised everybody that Dr. Giesel was on leave, correct?
I believe so.
And on December, I guess the first week of December, you were first spoken to by HR and risk management, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And they had advised you that there was an issue with Dr. Giesel and his dosing habits, correct?
They had asked about how we pull out medications, what medications we give with palliative extubations.
But you knew what was going on with Dr. Husel at that time, correct?
I knew bits and pieces, I didn't know everything.
Okay. And you were first approached by homicide detectives on the 8th of December, correct?
Yes,
And that occurred at 10:05 a.m. on December 8th, 2018, correct?
correct.
And that was, at that time, with a Detective Ann Pennington, a female detective,
Yes,
and a Detective Dana Kroom, correct?
yes, sir.
That gentleman sitting in the back, right there, right? Is that a yes?
Yes,
Okay. And they questioned you, first started about your experience there, how long you had worked there,
yes,
and subsequent to that, they got around to palliative withdrawals, correct?
yes,
And it's at this time that you had advised them that it had been a long time, in fact, you said you honestly, it had been a long time since you did a palliative extubation with Dr. Husel, correct?
yes,
And that was not true, correct?
I believe the last one was in September.
Which was just a couple months before December, right?
Yes,
Okay. And you also told the detectives that you didn't give fentanyl, that you gave Dilaudid and Versed, correct?
correct. I thought I had given,
That's correct, right?
correct.
Okay. That turned out not to be true, correct?
Yes,
And then when you were asked, when did this occur, you told them that it had been done in the summer, correct?
summer or fall, I believe.
If I show you your statement, would that refresh your recollection as to whether you told them it was the summer only?
Yes, please.
May I approach?
Okay.
It might have been in the summer.
That's what you told them, correct?
Correct,
You didn't mention anything about the fall, right?
correct.
And after they asked you more follow-up questions about fentanyl, you stated that you had given Dilaudid and Versed during palliative extubations, and that's mostly what you could remember, correct?
Correct,
That turned out not to be true, correct?
correct.
Then they asked you if you had any memory of giving any fentanyl, and you stated that you couldn't remember, and you'd have to look at your documentation, correct?
Yes,
And then they asked you if there were scenarios being asked about different types of doses for different types of patients. Do you recall that?
yes,
And one of the statements you made was that you wouldn't give 500 micrograms of fentanyl to a little old lady, correct?
correct.
Karina Blake was an elder woman, correct?
I believe she was in her 50s.
I'll get you that information in a minute, but it's your testimony that she was just in her 50s?
I believe so.
Okay, but you don't know for sure,
I think she was in her 50s.
okay? So, subsequent to that, you also told them that if you didn't feel the dose was appropriate, you would not give it, correct?
Correct,
And then you told them the steps and the things you would do should a doctor ever give you a dose amount that you did not agree with, correct?
yes,
Then at the very end of your interview, Detective Kroom asked you if you had any questions for them, correct?
yes,
And you didn't have any questions for them.
no, I did not.
Now, that interview lasted until 10:15, correct?
Yes,
So it was only 10 minutes, correct?
correct,
Where you had told them You didn't have any memory of giving any fentanyl, correct?
Yes.
You told him when you did an extubation with Dr. Husel, it was
Objection, Your Honor.
dilaudid and burst head, correct?
Asked and answered sustained.
Now, after 10:15, you were then called back by the detectives 30 minutes later, were you not?
Yes.
And you're aware that you're the only person spoken to that was called back, correct?
I was not aware.
I'm sorry?
I was not aware that I was the only one called back.
Objection, Your Honor. Since fact's
Okay.
not in evidence.
Overruled. Move on.
Now, it's at this time that Detective Kroon and Detective Pennington had confronted you with information that they had now, correct?
Yes.
And that in fact, you gave 500 micrograms of fentanyl to Miss Karina Blake, correct?
Yes.
Now, they didn't have her name, correct?
Correct.
And then they asked you if you remembered anything. Do you remember that?
Yes, I remember.
And it's at that point that you said you didn't remember the patient and you have no more information, correct?
Correct.
Now, that was on December 8th. After you left that second interview with law enforcement, you broke down and cried, correct?
I did. Yes.
And December 8th was a Saturday?
Yes.
That's fine. I can show one for September 22nd.
Sure.
Okay.
Now, I'm showing you a calendar of December 2018. Do you see that? And that is Exhibit RN-KM2. Do you see that, ma'am?
Yes.
Now, December 8th is a Saturday,
Yes.
okay? Now, the following Monday, I presume it's at that time you got yourself a lawyer, correct?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor.
And
Okay. Relevancy?
I'm tying it together.
Okay, tie it together quickly.
And it is then on the 13th that you had a proffer with the state attorney's office, correct?
Yes.
And present there was the elected state attorney of this county, Mr. O'Brien.
Yes.
Also present there was his first assistant, Mr. Jimmy Lowe.
Yes.
Also present there, Detective Kroon again, correct?
Yes.
And also again was Detective Pennington, correct?
Yes.
Now, within within 3 days, you got yourself a lawyer, correct?
Yes.
Your lawyer reached out and managed to set up a meeting with the elected state attorney, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
Yes.
And
Sustained.
in addition,
How, you should,
I'll move on, Judge, I'll move on. And in fact, the two of you, the two sides, you're, on behalf of you, it was set up to get what's called a proffer letter, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
do you know?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And this would lay out the conditions of what can and cannot be used against you, correct?
Yes.
And it's at this point that you decided to be a state cooperator, correct?
Yes.
And as part of your cooperation, the first thing you had to do is go in and have this meeting, correct?
Yes.
And the very first thing that you discuss during this meeting is the palliative extubation of Karina Blake, correct?
Yes.
And now, you remember that she was a homeless woman, correct?
Yes.
You remember that she had gotten intubated, correct?
Yes.
You remember that she needed a bunch of medications to keep her alive?
Yes.
You remembered that that the prior nurse had told you she was probably going to code?
Yes.
You remembered that she was still in full code status?
Yes, she was.
you remember that that you had talked to your charge nurse, Ms. Ann Irwin, about making her your only patient for the night.
Yes.
And that's because you remembered she was very ill.
Yes, she was.
You also remembered that she had max pressors.
Yes.
And you also remembered what her blood pressure was. Correct?
I don't understand the question. Like where her blood pressure was?
Correct. That her blood pressure was low.
Yes, it was low.
And you remembered that she was approximately somewhere around 50 micrograms a minute on Levofed, correct?
Yes.
And you remembered that you had an orientee with you, correct?
Yes, I did.
And you remembered her name was Lauren Schlasser,
Yes.
okay? You also remembered that you needed to put a board behind Ms. Blake's back, correct?
Yes.
You also remembered that board, that you also had to put, I guess, something on her to shock her?
Yes.
You remember quite a bit of details rather than me getting into all of them, right?
Yes.
When just a few days earlier, you told the detectives you couldn't remember a thing, correct?
Correct.
You told this jury that a nurse is not supposed to lie, correct?
Correct.
Now, but that's to a patient, correct?
Correct.
You don't think it's okay to lie to detectives, homicide detectives, do you?
No.
And part of your cooperation, also, what you did basically was show them all of the text messages that you had with all of the other nurses, correct?
I did.
And all of the communication between all of the nurses and you, correct?
Yes.
And you talked to them about all the phone calls you had with all the different nurses, correct?
Yes.
You basically talked to them about every single nurse that you had contact with
Yes.
and the content of that information, correct?
Yes.
Now, Miss Karina Blake's palliative extubation was in fact verified by the pharmacy, correct?
It was.
They approved it, correct?
Yes.
I'd like to show you Defendant's Exhibit CB1, page 634. Do you see that the order was given at 20:05?
Yes.
That's 8:05 in the evening?
Yes.
And it was verified by the pharmacist 5 minutes later?
Yes.
And it wasn't given until 12 at night, correct?
That's what it looks like. May I explain why that happens?
No, I'm sure you can explain yourself with Mr. Zion. He'll ask you some more questions after I'm done. Now, this is when you also started to talk to, well, let me rephrase that. When you reached out to the prosecutor's office, you informed them that you had more information to give them, right?
Yes.
And since you are now a state cooperator, you informed them of, that's the first time you brought up about this.
Characterization, Your Honor?
Sustained.
I'm sorry, Mr. Zion, I didn't hear you.
He objected to the clarification as the identification that she was a state cooperator or something along that line.
He used that word, Judge. State cooperator is the word he used.
Yeah. Sustained.
while you were cooperating for the state, you gave them information. You gave the prosecutors information, or this was the first time you mentioned this 24 of 24, correct?
Correct.
And apparently there was a talk that he gave before, right?
Yes.
And a talk that he gave after, right?
Yes.
The problem is, you never, ever, ever heard Dr. Husel speak to a family for a palliative extubation, correct?
I don't think with the new talk. I don't know if I've heard it for the old talk.
Well, the extubation you did with Dr. Husel, it was the resident that went in and had the conversation.
Yes, that's correct.
So during that extubation, you didn't hear him say a word, correct?
Correct.
And then he changed his talk, according to you, correct?
Yes.
And if he's 24 for 24, why would he change his talk?
I think the 24 for 24 was after he had changed the talk.
You're aware that he's only given 30 extubations in the entire time he's worked there, correct?
Objection, Your Honor, that is not
Sustained.
evidence.
Well, let me ask you this. How many times in your employment, how long did you work there?
2.5 years.
In 2.5 years, you only did one palliative extubation with Dr. Husel, correct?
I don't know.
I recognize you might have issues with your memory, but you haven't
Okay,
told...
counselor.
Ma'am, you have not told, or during this proffer session that you had, you did not talk to them about any other palliative extubations that you had with Dr. Husel.
I can't remember any of the other
My
ones.
question to you, ma'am, is during this entire proffer session, where you were basically given a letter that said basically, let me rephrase that. Part of this letter that you obtained was that what you said would not be used against you, correct?
Correct.
And you needed that before you went in and talked to them, right?
Yes.
And
Objection, Your Honor.
as part of this...
Okay, hold on. I'll permit it, but let's get to it.
Sure. So you had the opportunity to tell them everything you knew, correct?
Yes.
And you wanted to tell them everything you knew, correct?
Yes.
And you knew that what you said couldn't be held against you, correct?
Yes.
And you never told them about any other palliative extubations with Dr. Husel, correct?
I did not.
In fact, as you sit here today, the only palliative extubation that you could talk about is that of Karina Blake, correct?
That's the only one I remember.
Fair to say, if a patient of yours passes, that's something you probably remember, right?
Yes.
Now, you talked about this bromance. That's the first time you also brought up this bromance thing too, right?
Yes.
And the fact is, you didn't like Mr. Deemer, Mr. Rudman, the two Mr. Rudmans that worked there because they teased you, correct?
I didn't mind working with them. I was there to do a job. I wasn't there to make friends.
You didn't like that they teased you, correct?
I don't remember them teasing me. They might have.
They might have.
I don't remember.
Is Stephanie Lachard part of the bromance?
No.
Is Jamie Burke part of the bromance?
No.
Is Wesley Black part of the bromance?
I don't know for sure.
Is Jordan Blair part of the bromance?
I don't think so.
Ma'am, you testified a couple times that you liked Dr. Husel,
Yes.
but you liked yourself a little bit more, correct?
I don't understand the question.
You liked yourself a lot more than you liked Dr. Husel, correct?
She didn't understand your question.
I'll withdraw the question. Thank you, Judge.
Anything else?
Just one moment. No further questions.
Redirect?
Well, we'll call it State's Exhibit 100. So I don't think we're up to that number yet.
We couldn't hear a word you said about the identification. I couldn't. Could you re-identify, please?
State's Exhibit 100, by stipulation, since we're showing calendars, and since you made the point, summer versus fall, showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 100, a calendar date from September of 2018. Fall or summer, Corinna Blake was extubated on the 25th.
Objection, Judge. She agreed that she said summer and not fall. Counsel's trying to insert that as fall or summer.
You got into it a ways I'm permitted.
Yeah. When did summer end, according to this State's Exhibit 100?
September 21st.
4 days, is that, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4 days before Corinna Blake?
Yes.
You cried after you talked to the police?
I did.
Were they mean to you?
No, I was caught off guard.
Did they scream at you?
No,
Did they threaten you?
no,
Let me ask you this. You ever walk into a room and talk to 2 murder police before?
no.
Were you scared?
Yes.
How's,
You got on it. Overruled.
I've never heard the phrase murder police.
well, I've never heard this spring.
Well, rephrase. Let's call them detectives what they are.
Homicide detectives from the Columbus Police Department that investigate murders.
That was my first time.
What was your state of mind when you walked into that room and realized you were talking to 2 homicide detectives from the Columbus Police Department that investigate murders?
I was terrified.
Did you try to cooperate with them?
Yes, I tried.
Were you so scared? Did you go out thereafter and engage the services of a defense attorney?
Yes,
Did you think about what they had asked you about?
yes,
Did you thereafter meet with the detectives again voluntarily
yes,
with your attorney?
yes.
Did you sign any plea agreements or immunity agreements as part of this agreement to meet with the police a 3rd time and with the county prosecutor?
I signed the proffer.
A proffer letter,
Yes.
which meant it's off the record.
Objection. Leading.
I would agree. Let's rephrase it.
How was it explained to you what a proffer letter meant?
Anything that I would say would not be held against me.
Was it explained to you that it was off the record? It was an off-the-record conversation.
It was recorded, so I don't think it was off the record.
I'm sorry. We'll get back to that. We'll pull it back up here. Yeah, why don't you print that out? Oh, you need the computer. Okay. Yeah, it's just off.
I got it.
I'm just trying to get the fact that it's off the record. At any rate, did you tell them the truth in that meeting?
As much as I could remember at that time, yes.
Okay. When you first met with the police on December 8th, did they give you the name of the patient?
No.
Did they give you the date that the patient was treated?
Yes, I got the date.
So you knew the date on the first time. Did they give you the exact medications that were ordered and the doses that were ordered?
Yes.
All right. On that first date,
Yes.
on December 8th, and that did not jar your memory as to what it was going on?
It did not yet.
Objection to the leading, Judge.
Sustained.
Showing you what I marked for identification purposes is State's Exhibit 101. what does that letter say regarding whether this is an on-the-record discussion or an off-the-record discussion?
To assure there's no misunderstandings.
Just, if you could review it, and then say whether or not that refreshes your memory as to whether it says it's off the record or on the record.
It's an off-the-record statement.
All right, thank you. On December 13th, when you're meeting with everyone, did you still like and respect Dr. Husel?
Yes,
Do you recall signing a petition to support Dr. Husel?
I did.
Okay,
Is that, oh,
we're getting into stuff that's outside the scope.
outside the scope, Judge? He asked about
Okay.
her, how much he liked her versus liked himself.
I understand that. It's outside the scope.
All right. Did you still support Dr. Husel at that time?
Yes,
Did you lie about anything regarding your experiences with Dr. Husel in that off-the-record discussion you had with the
No.
police and the county prosecutor? Did you lie about anything you said today about your interactions with Dr. Husel and what you observed in the culture?
no.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Okay, ma'am, you may step down. Why don't we take 10 minutes, guys?
Judge, I think we're out of witnesses.
You're out of
I think
witnesses?
we're out of witnesses.
Man, we're just burning
We are out of
through.
witnesses, Judge, so maybe we can wrap it up together.
Okay. Let's get started at 9 in the morning. Remember the admonition. Have a wonderful evening. Okay? I hear it's absolutely gorgeous outside. I may get to see it someday. Okay? But with that, have a wonderful evening. Remember the admonitions. We'll get started at 9 in the morning. And whatever coffee that was, I walked down the hall this morning, it smelled so good. I don't know what it is, but it just was one of those things that kind of want to take a turn. Okay? Have a good evening, guys. Be safe. The hallway was pleasant, that's for sure. Have a good evening, guys.
You're welcome to the coffee, by the way. Yeah.
I didn't get any of it, I just got the smell.